Marcus had been a janitor at Evercrest Industries for nearly 5 years. Every morning he walked through the tall glass doors of the building, carrying his mop and bucket, while watching the busy executives rush past him in their expensive suits. He had grown used to the quiet invisibility of his life. His work was unnoticed, his presence ignored. Yet Marcus did his job with pride. Every floor he polished, every desk he cleaned, he imagined doing it with care not for anyone else but for himself. He believed that dignity was not measured by wealth, but by the heart one put into their work. Victoria Evercrest, the CEO, was everything Marcus was not. She was rich, confident, and beautiful in a way that commanded attention. Her sharp suits, her carefully styled hair, her sparkling eyes, they all told the world that she was untouchable. Employees feared her, outsiders admired her, and even other billionaires considered her untouchable in the corporate world. Yet to Marcus she seemed human, even fragile. Behind the mask of perfection she wore every day, their paths rarely crossed, except for small moments. Marcus opening doors, cleaning the floor while Victoria passed by, exchanging polite nods. But over time those nods grew into smiles. Something unspoken developed between them, a quiet recognition that they both noticed the other in a way no one else did. Marcus felt warmth in her presence, a light that made the cold, shiny office feel alive. Victoria, on the other hand, felt a strange comfort in Marcus's simplicity. He didn't care about her money or power. He saw her as a person, and that was rare. One evening, the office was empty except for Marcus and Victoria. He was finishing the last round of cleaning, mopping the polished floors until they reflected the ceiling lights like water. Victoria had stayed late for a meeting, buried in papers and decisions that only she could make. Marcus noticed her tense shoulders, the tired lines on her face, and without thinking, he offered a small smile. "Long day, ma'am?" he asked softly. Victoria looked up surprised. No one in her world asked her that with sincerity. "Yes," she admitted, her voice softer than usual. "Too many decisions, too many people relying on me." Marcus nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. "It's okay to take a break sometimes. Even the strongest people need a rest." His words were simple, but they carried a kind of truth that made Victoria pause. From that night, their small conversations became a routine. It started with small talk, comments about the weather, laughter over a spilled cup of coffee, a shared smile at the office cat someone had left behind. Slowly, they began to share more personal things. Marcus talked about his childhood, his dreams, and how he wanted a life that mattered. Victoria spoke of the pressures she faced, the loneliness behind her wealth, and the fear that no one could ever understand her. No one noticed the way their glances lingered, the subtle touch of hands when passing files, the quiet moments where the office felt empty, yet full of something alive. It was a forbidden connection. Society would never approve, and the disparity between their worlds was enormous. Marcus, a janitor, and Victoria, a billionaire. How could their lives ever intersect beyond polite nods and shared smiles? Yet hearts do not care for logic. One rainy evening, as the city lights shimmered on the wet streets outside, their connection deepened. They were tired, human, and longing for warmth that money and power could never provide. And in that quiet, empty office, they discovered a spark neither of them expected. A spark that would change both of their lives forever. The rain fell heavily that night, drumming against the tall windows of Evercrest Industries. Marcus was finishing his last round of cleaning, the mop moving slowly over the glossy floors, leaving behind a trail of reflection. Victoria lingered in her office, surrounded by towering stacks of papers and a laptop that had been humming for hours. Both of them felt the weight of exhaustion, yet neither wanted to leave. There was something in the quiet of the empty building and the silence between them that pulled them closer. Marcus wiped his hands on his apron and leaned against the doorframe of her office. "You should go home," he said softly. "It's late, and this work, it can wait until tomorrow." Victoria looked up at him, her eyes tired but alert, a small smile forming on her lips. "I can't," she admitted. "There's too much to do. I have to finish this tonight." He nodded, understanding the pressure she carried. But something in the way she looked at him, the vulnerability, the loneliness, made his heart ache. It was a look that spoke of desires unspoken, of dreams buried beneath wealth and responsibility. And for a brief moment he imagined a world where she could just be a woman, not a CEO. Victoria stood and walked toward him, her heels clicking softly against the floor. You're always so calm, she said. How can you be so calm when the world expects so much from you? Marcus smiled, a small, humble smile. I focus on what I can control, he said simply. Life is hard enough without worrying about things I cannot change. There was silence after that, a tension that neither could ignore. The rain tapped against the windows, the room feeling smaller and more intimate than it should have. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. The way her hair fell over her shoulder, the softness in her eyes, the faint crease of worry between her brows. He wanted to tell her something that could never be said openly in the bustling office or in polite society. Victoria felt it too, the pull between them, the electricity in the air. She had tried to ignore it, tried to tell herself it was impossible, that no connection could exist between a billionaire and a janitor. But in that empty office, the rules of the world seemed distant and meaningless. She wanted to be close to him, to feel warmth in a life that had always demanded cold perfection. One thing led to another. Words and glances became a brush of hands, a lingering touch that spoke of longing and need. The city lights outside reflected in the windows, casting long shadows, and in that moment, the office became their own private world. Marcus took her hand gently, and Victoria did not pull away. Hearts pounded, breaths quickened, and the fear of crossing boundaries was eclipsed by a desire they could no longer deny. It was brief, it was passionate, and it was real. When the storm finally passed outside, the room was silent again, but everything had changed. Marcus returned to his mop and bucket, and Victoria went back to her papers. Yet neither could erase the memory. It was a moment they would both carry with them, a secret connection that neither could explain to the world, and perhaps a moment that could never happen again. In the following days, tension lingered. Marcus avoided looking at Victoria too directly, and she carried herself with her usual controlled elegance. But the world between them had shifted. Every shared smile, every accidental touch carried a weight now, a silent acknowledgement of what had happened. Neither of them spoke of it openly, yet both felt it. It was a dangerous closeness, one that could not exist in public, one that defied the rules of their worlds. And still, in quiet moments, the moments when the office was empty, when the lights were dim, when the rain fell outside, they remembered that night, and a spark ignited inside them both, promising that their connection was far from over. Months passed after that night. The memory of their forbidden connection lingered in both their hearts, unspoken but impossible to forget. Marcus continued his work quietly, sweeping floors, emptying trash, and polishing the gleaming hallways. Every day he passed Victoria's office and caught glimpses of her, the way she carried herself with her usual perfection. Her sharp gaze softened only in rare moments. He had learned to live with the distance, to hide the longing in his heart behind his calm, steady demeanor. Victoria, on the other hand, felt an unease she could not name. Her life had always been controlled, every decision calculated, every step planned, yet now she felt a strange unrest that gnawed at her, a flutter in her body she could not ignore. She told herself it was stress, the consequence of running an empire, the result of too many sleepless nights. She avoided Marcus when she could, buried herself in meetings, surrounded herself with assistants and advisors, but the feeling would not leave. Then, one morning, everything changed. Victoria awoke with a shock of realization. She was pregnant. Her mind spun as she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the small, undeniable proof of life growing inside her. Panic surged through her veins. She had always been in control, but this was something beyond control, beyond calculation. A part of her wanted to deny it, to pretend it could not be true, to erase the memory of Marcus from her life entirely. Fear took hold. How could this happen? A janitor, a man far below her in society, in status, in power. And yet, the undeniable truth stared back at her from a small test. She could not deny it, even if she wanted to. Her mind raced with questions, doubts, and a strange, terrifying hope. She imagined the whispers, the judgment, the scandal that would follow if anyone knew. And so in a panic she made a choice. She would deny Marcus, pretend the child was a mistake, a biological accident, anything but a connection to him. When Marcus returned from his morning rounds, Victoria avoided his gaze, her heart hammering. She spoke to him politely, carefully, and yet her words were laced with coldness. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady, "you need to understand, nothing happened between us. That night, it was a mistake, a fleeting moment. It cannot happen again. Marcus stared at her, pain flickering in his eyes. He had expected anger, perhaps even contempt, but the denial struck him differently. It cut him to the bone. He wanted to argue, to plead, to tell her the truth of what he felt, the truth of what he knew, but he could not. Marcus had learned patience, restraint, and dignity in the lonely corridors of the building. He nodded silently, his jaw tight, and walked away without a word. Inside, he felt a quiet heartbreak unlike anything he had known. His dreams of a future with Victoria, the shared moments, the laughter, the warmth, seemed to crumble before him. Yet somewhere deep in his heart he knew the truth. He would wait, he would hope, and he would love silently for both of them. Victoria, meanwhile, tried to move forward. She buried herself in her empire, working longer hours, traveling more, surrounding herself with distractions. She told herself denial was protection, protection for her reputation, for her career, and for the fragile image of control she had built over decades. Yet at night, when the city was dark and silent, she felt the tiny life inside her move and her heart ached. She imagined Marcus's face, the kindness in his eyes, the warmth in his smile, and for the first time she understood that some things could not be erased by pride or fear. And so, their lives continued on parallel paths, Marcus hiding his longing, Victoria hiding her truth, both carrying the weight of unspoken emotions, and both unknowingly walking toward a future neither of them could yet imagine. Victoria Evercrest had always believed she could control everything in her life. Her empire was built on precision, discipline, and careful planning. Yet now she faced something she could not command, a life growing inside her. She tried to ignore it at first, pretending the fluttering, tiny movements were nothing. She buried herself in work, signing contracts, attending endless meetings, and traveling across cities. But the truth refused to stay hidden. At the office, she wore loose dresses, oversized coats, and high collars to hide the changes in her body. She forced herself to smile at colleagues, to appear composed and confident, while her heart raced with fear every time she thought of Marcus. Each morning, she would catch a glimpse of him in the hallway, quietly sweeping the floors, his eyes calm and focused, and she felt a mix of longing and dread. Marcus had not spoken a word about that night since the revelation, and Victoria wondered if he even knew, or if he had guessed. Marcus, meanwhile, had not stopped thinking about her or the child. He moved through his days with silent determination, finishing his janitorial work with careful precision, but his mind wandered constantly. He imagined holding the baby, watching the tiny hands curl around his fingers, whispering promises no money could ever buy, safety, love, and presence. He watched Victoria from afar, noticing the way she avoided him, the tension in her shoulders, the small sighs she let escape when she thought no one was watching. He understood her fear, her pride, and yet his heart ached with hope. Victoria's inner struggle grew heavier each day. Pride battled love, fear battled desire, and shame battled truth. She had always been untouchable, and now she faced a vulnerability she could not ignore. She hated herself for thinking about Marcus, for remembering that night, for imagining a future she had no courage to claim. She told herself that denial was the only way to survive, that if she pretended it never happened, she could protect herself and her child. Yet denial came with a cost. At night, in the silence of her penthouse, Victoria felt the tiny kicks inside her. Each movement reminded her that life had a way of breaking through walls, no matter how strong they were. She remembered Marcus's kindness, his gentle words, the way he looked at her without judgment, and every time she thought of him, guilt twisted inside her chest. She was denying the truth, but her heart refused to comply. Marcus noticed subtle changes in Victoria, too. He saw the way she paused when passing him, the way her eyes lingered for a moment longer than usual, the quiet sighs she tried to mask behind her professional demeanor. He sensed her struggle even if she would not admit it. And though she denied him, though she kept him at a distance, he refused to give up hope. Love, he believed, was patient. Love waited, and he would wait as long as it took. The world outside remained oblivious to the tension simmering between them. To everyone else, Victoria Evercrest was as perfect and untouchable as ever, and Marcus was just a quiet janitor doing his job. But behind the polished walls, a storm brewed, one of fear, pride, hope, and longing. It was a storm that neither could escape, and yet in the middle of that struggle, a strange beauty existed. Marcus's quiet resilience, Victoria's hidden vulnerability, the unborn life they both carried in their hearts, these threads wove a fragile, unspoken bond. One day, Marcus silently hoped Victoria would see it too. One day, perhaps, she would let go of fear and allow love, hope, and truth to guide her. Until that day, they lived in parallel worlds, Victoria hiding her pregnancy in her heart, Marcus hiding his love and his patience, both carrying the weight of unspoken emotions, and both waiting for the moment when the impossible might become possible. The night the baby came, the city outside was quiet, washed in silver light from the street lamps. Victoria had been pacing her penthouse for hours, her heart pounding like a drum she could not control. She was alone in the hospital room, surrounded by the sterile smell of antiseptic and the beeping of machines, a world away from the polished floors and bustling offices she ruled every day. Fear gripped her, a sharp twisting sensation in her chest. She had spent months denying the truth, hiding her pregnancy, pushing Marcus away, but now there was no escape. Labor was long and grueling. Each contraction tore at her pride, her fear, and the carefully constructed walls she had built around herself. She thought of Marcus constantly, his kind eyes, his quiet patience, his gentle smile. How could she have been so afraid of him? How could she have denied the love that had always been there, the truth that was written in every look, every touch, every quiet moment they had shared? The nurses moved around her with calm efficiency, unaware of the storm inside her heart. Victoria clutched the sides of the bed, sweat on her brow, tears streaking her cheeks, and finally, after hours that felt like a lifetime, she heard the first cry, a tiny, desperate, perfect sound. It was a sound that broke something deep inside her, a sound that dissolved fear, pride, and denial in a single moment. When the doctor placed the newborn in her arms, Victoria's hands shook. The baby's eyes, wide and bright, looked at her with a trust she had never known before. The tiny fingers curled around hers and a warmth flooded her chest that she could not explain. She had spent so long hiding from love, hiding from Marcus, hiding from herself. But now, in this fragile moment, there was no more hiding. She whispered apologies she could never say aloud, promises she could never take back, and a silent plea for forgiveness. And then she did the unthinkable. She picked up the phone and dialed Marcus's number. Each ring was a drumbeat in her chest, each second stretching into eternity. When he answered, his voice was calm but filled with quiet tension. "Victoria?" He said. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. It's true, the baby. It's yours. It's ours. I need you." There was silence on the other end, and then Marcus's voice broke softly. "I knew," he said. "I've always known." Minutes later, he arrived at the hospital, rushing through the sliding doors as if the city itself had cleared a path for him. When he saw Victoria holding their child, tears welled in his eyes, and he walked toward her with careful, reverent steps. The baby stirred in her arms, tiny hands reaching out instinctively, and Marcus felt a love he had never known before surge through him, raw and uncontainable. Victoria looked at him, her pride gone, her fear dissolved, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel completely, utterly vulnerable. "I was so scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I denied you. I denied us. But now I can't anymore." Marcus knelt beside her bed, taking her hand gently and then leaning to kiss the top of her head. "It's okay," he whispered. "We have this moment. We have our child. That's what matters. Nothing else does." The baby cooed softly, a tiny, perfect life connecting them in a way no wealth, no pride, no fear could ever undo. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face as Marcus cradled the infant in his strong, careful hands. She watched him look at their child with awe, with love, with a devotion that went beyond words. And in that moment, she understood what she had been missing all along. Love that was patient, love that was kind, love that did not judge, love that waited. For hours they sat together, 3 lives intertwined in the quiet hospital room. The world outside continued its noisy, relentless pace, but inside, there was only this: Marcus, Victoria, and the tiny life that had changed everything. In that fragile, beautiful moment, the impossible became real, and Victoria realized something she could never forget. No amount of money, power, or pride could compare to the love she now held in her arms, the love of Marcus, and the life they had created together. In the days after the birth, Victoria's world felt like it had shifted on its axis. She had always believed that power and money were the most important things in life, that control and perfection defined her existence. Yet now, holding her child in her arms, watching Marcus's quiet devotion, she realized how empty those things had been without love. The baby's soft cries, the tiny hands reaching out, and the peaceful sleep of her child brought her more joy than any boardroom victory ever had. Victoria watched Marcus as he changed diapers, gently rocked the baby, and whispered promises of protection and love. She felt something unfamiliar, humility. She had been so proud, so certain of her status, yet she now understood that wealth could not buy what she was seeing. Marcus, a man she had once thought of as beneath her, was showing a strength and tenderness that no riches could match. Every gesture, every patient word, every small act of care was proof of a love that was steady, enduring, and true. Marcus noticed her watching him. He smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from the baby's tiny face. "She looks like you," he said quietly, his voice full of warmth. Victoria's eyes welled up. She had tried to deny him, to hide from the truth, yet here he was, showing her the world she had always missed. He had been patient, kind, and unwavering even when she had turned away. He had loved not for status or appearances, but because he truly cared. As days turned into weeks, Victoria began to open herself up. She let Marcus into her world in ways she had never allowed anyone before. They laughed together, shared quiet moments late at night, and marveled at the small milestones of their child. She saw how the baby's first smile could light up Marcus's face, how a tiny coo could bring tears to his eyes. And slowly she realized that the life she had been so careful to control was now beautiful, precisely because it could not be controlled. Outside, the world continued its judgment and whispers. Victoria's colleagues noticed the change in her demeanor, the softer expressions, the rare moments of vulnerability. But Victoria no longer cared. She had learned a lesson that could not be taken away. Happiness was not measured in wealth or power, but in the strength of love, the courage to be vulnerable, and the bond of family. Marcus had taught her that without even trying. For Marcus, life had always been about perseverance. He had worked in silence, swept floors, cleaned offices, and watched Victoria from a distance, always hoping. And now, seeing her transformation, seeing her open her heart fully to love, he felt a quiet pride. He had never needed recognition, never sought reward, yet he had found something greater than he had ever imagined. A family built not on wealth, but on trust, patience, and genuine care. Victoria often caught herself staring at Marcus and their child, marveling at the simple yet profound beauty of their life. She whispered apologies for her past pride, for the fear and denial that had kept her from seeing the truth. Marcus only shook his head gently, his eyes full of forgiveness. "It doesn't matter," he said. "We have now, and that is enough." The baby grew stronger every day, and with each passing moment, Victoria felt her own strength grow. Not the strength of a billionaire controlling an empire, but the strength of a mother and a woman who had learned to love without walls. Marcus, beside her, remained steadfast, their quiet partnership blossoming into something neither had expected, but both cherished deeply. And in the soft glow of their home, Victoria finally understood that life's greatest wealth was not measured in money or status, but in love, patience, and the courage to embrace it. She had once denied Marcus, doubted him, and tried to hide from the truth. But now, holding their child, seeing his unwavering devotion, she knew she had found something far more valuable than she could have ever imagined. A family, a love, and a life that could never be taken away. Years passed, and life for Marcus, Victoria, and their child had settled into a quiet, beautiful rhythm. The city outside continued to race on with its noise, lights, and endless demands, but inside their home there was a calm that only love could bring. Victoria, once untouchable and always in control, had learned to let go. She had learned that wealth and power meant little without the warmth of family, the comfort of trust, and the strength of love. Marcus had always been humble, quiet, and patient. His work as a janitor had taught him more than cleanliness. It had taught him dignity, perseverance, and the ability to love without expectation. Now he watched his child grow, small hands grasping his fingers, tiny laughter filling the rooms, and he felt a joy that no money could ever buy. He had waited for years, loved in silence, and finally the life he had imagined for himself was here. And Victoria, beside him, had become a partner in a way he had never dared to hope. Victoria often looked at Marcus while he played with their child, his laughter mixing with the baby's tiny giggles. She felt a deep gratitude, a quiet awe at how far they had come. She remembered the fear, the denial, the moments she had almost lost them both. And now, watching Marcus teach their child small lessons about kindness, patience, and courage, she knew that he had been the foundation all along. He had shown her what love truly meant, steadfast, gentle, and unshakable. The world outside had its opinions, its whispers, and its judgments, but none of it mattered anymore. Victoria no longer cared about status or image. She had learned that true power was in vulnerability, in the courage to admit mistakes, and in the strength to embrace love fully. Marcus had never judged her. He had only loved her, patiently and quietly, and that love had changed everything. Their child, too, grew surrounded by warmth, laughter, and care. Each milestone, first steps, first words, first shy smiles, was a celebration of a love that had been hard-won. Victoria and Marcus shared these moments with tears in their eyes, knowing that the past, with all its fear and denial, had led them here. And they felt a deep certainty. Nothing could ever break the bond they now shared. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of gold and orange, Victoria sat on the porch, holding their child in her lap while Marcus leaned back in the chair beside them. The baby's tiny hands reached out for Marcus's face, and he laughed, soft and full of life. Victoria's eyes glistened as she watched them. "I was so afraid," she whispered almost to herself. "I denied everything, but now I see what I almost lost." Marcus took her hand gently. "We didn't lose anything," he said softly. "We found it. All of it, love, family, happiness, and it's ours to keep." In that quiet moment, Victoria felt a peace she had never known. She realized that life's true wealth was not in towering buildings, shining suits, or endless money, but in the connection between hearts, the warmth of a home filled with love, and the courage to follow it, even when the world tried to tell her otherwise. Marcus, Victoria, and their child sat together as the sun disappeared below the horizon. They were a family forged in patience, tested by fear, and strengthened by love. Victoria no longer saw Marcus as beneath her. She saw him as her equal, her partner, and the man who had shown her the most valuable lessons of her life. And Marcus no longer saw himself as invisible. He saw the life he had always dreamed of, a life built not on wealth but on heart. And in that moment, as laughter, love, and hope filled their home, Victoria understood something she could never forget. Some connections are stronger than fear, some love is greater than pride, and some families are priceless because they are built on patience, courage, and unwavering devotion. They had survived the impossible, faced their fears, and found a happiness that no one could take away. Marcus had swept floors, yes, but he had also swept away walls between hearts. Victoria had inherited wealth, yes, but she had gained something far more precious: a family, a love, and a life that would last forever. And for the first time, all three of them, father, mother, and child, felt completely, beautifully, and unshakably whole.